This Tales of Destiny 2 retrospective was brought to you by my lovely patrons on Patreon. For as little as $3 a month, you can get your name shouted out at the start of every Xenosanctum video, as well as access to bonus behind the scenes content. Okay, so when I started the series, I initially planned to skip the Japanese exclusive Tales games with no fan translations. But recently, I was able to grab all 6 mainline Tales games for the PS2 of a Japanese man on eBay, and my interest got the better of me. So I decided, why not? Let's look at Wolf Team's last Tales game as we look back on Tales of Destiny 2 in Arabic numerals this time. While Tales of Eternia would come out to critical praise from fans and critics alike, it would end up falling around 250,000 units short of its predecessor and would not crack the 1 million sales mark. One of the main reasons for this game's underperformance was the rise of 6th generation consoles, which took focus away from the original PlayStation, as gamers looked to get into the next generation of games. As a result, Namco greatly desired a new Tales game for these new consoles, especially after their rivals in Square unveiled their latest game, Final Fantasy X, for the PlayStation 2, which looked to push graphics to a whole new level. However, with Tales of Eternia's development only just wrapping up, Wolf Team would require a lot of time to create a brand new Tales game, optimised for this new generation of consoles. Thus, Wolf Team decided on the drastic move of splitting their team in two, with the majority of the studio working on the series' grand debut into 3D, while a secondary team would be tasked with creating another 2D entry as quickly as possible. With only 2 years to create a brand new Tales game on a brand new console, the secondary team would need to find new ways to cut down on development times. For starters, the team decided to make this new game a direct sequel to a previous Tales game, thus preventing the need to create a brand new world with new lore. Tales of Destiny seemed to be the obvious choice due to the large amount of untapped potential the team saw in that world, thus Tales of Destiny 2 was born. With the game setting set, Team Destiny, as it would come to be called, would get to work creating the story and gameplay. For the story, the team looked to the Star Wars franchise and were inspired by the hero's journey undertaken by Luke Skywalker. As a result, the story would focus around Stan's son, Kyle, as he would go on a similar journey as Luke, from a young boy to a hero, learning from those around him. This would also coincide with the game's characteristic genre of liberating fate RPG. As for the gameplay, with Tales of Eternia basically perfecting the 2D battle formula, the team would have to think outside the box when it came to gameplay. This would involve adding new mechanics to battles, which changed how players would approach fights. To account for these more complicated battle systems, the team would also apply a major update to the AI to improve their effectiveness in battle. Now, when it comes to localization, I presume most of you think this is what happened. Those are some pretty good sales figures. I think our rebranding of this game was a really good idea.
Sir, Namco Japan just came in with their new Tales game for us.
Cool, let's see it. Ah, crap. But in fact, there were other factors at play to why this game remains one of the 3 Tales games with no official English release. For one, this would be the 4th 2D Tales game, in an age where nearly all other big name series had gone 3D, and thus Namco likely worried about the game receiving poor reception from Western audiences, who would be expecting something more grand. Despite this, Sony Computer Entertainment had planned to take Tales of Destiny 2 and other games on a world tour to promote the next generation of JRPGs. However, tensions between the US and Iraq would put a stop to this tour. And so, Tales of Destiny 2 would remain untranslated, with translation groups only getting as far as a basic menu patch, which I would not recommend playing for reasons. By 2021, it seemed like this game would forever remain a Japanese exclusive title. That was until the Lumia Tales project would announce that they would be translating the entire game for Western audiences, which is why I want to give them a shout out in this video for finally translating this much desired JRPG for players like myself. However, since it's not quite finished yet, I'll unfortunately be stuck playing the original 2002 PS2 game release. So let us see what happened following the events of Tales of Destiny. The story begins right at the climax of Tales of Destiny, where we see Stan thrusting Dimlos into the Eye of Atamoni, along with the other Swordians, destroying both them and the Eye, and saving the people of Earth from the threat of the Aetherians. The story then jumps 18 years into the future where we meet our new protagonist, Kyle Dunamis, who is the son of Stan and Ruti. To my knowledge, this makes Stan the only Tales protagonist to go all the way with the game's female lead. What a Chad! We see Kyle and the other children of the Dunamis orphanage on the run from a bear-like monster, and it seems like they're in big trouble when Kyle's childhood friend Lonnie Dunamis rushes in and saves the group by killing the monsters. Lonnie then helps see Kyle and the children back to Cressa village. Back at the village, the two make their way to the orphanage, as Kyle inquires what Lonnie has been up to since he left the village to join the Order of Atamoni. Lonnie explains that the Order got word of a giant lens in a nearby ruin that could be worth up to 3 million gold. Intrigued by his adventurous nature and the fact that 3 million gold would cover the orphanage's fees for years, Kyle goes to find his mother and asks permission to explore the ruins with Lonnie. Being concerned for his safety, and the fact that he was almost killed by a monster, Ruti refuses to allow Kyle to go to the ruins and scolds him. However, the next day, Kyle and Lonnie decide to go to the ruins anyway to try and find the lens before the Order do. Evading the exploration party sent by the Order, the two find the giant lens embedded in a tree. Approaching the lens, the two duck for cover as the lens explodes in a giant flash of blue light, as a young girl appears where the lens once was. The girl begins mumbling about wanting a hero to change the fate of history, to which Kyle, wanting to live up to his father's name, announces that he is the hero. However, the girl just ignores him and walks off. The two are about to follow when suddenly the Order's exploration party arrives and, upon seeing the lens missing, accuses Kyle and Lonnie of being thieves and arrests them. Much like his father before him, Kyle and Lonnie soon find themselves in the dungeons beneath Daria's shield. The two see their situation as hopeless when suddenly a mysterious fencer wearing a skull's mask drops in. The man, who had overheard Kyle talking about being a hero, questions if Kyle really has what it takes to be a hero, to which Kyle is defiant. Kyle then asks who the man is, to which the man replies that he has no name. As a result, Kyle calls the man Judas. Judas then approaches the prison door and blows it open using a sword that looks awfully familiar to a certain swordian from Tales of Destiny. The three escape the prison in Daria's shield via the sewers before emerging on the outskirts of town, where Judas parts way from the other two, who run back to Cressa to face a furious Ruti. Despite Ruti's anger at Kyle's actions, Kyle remains defiant that he wants to become the hero the mysterious girl is looking for, and declares to Ruti that he'll be leaving the orphanage to go on a long adventure. Ruti refuses, but the next day, upon realising that Kyle has the same adventurous spirit as Stan, Ruti allows Kyle and Lonnie to leave. And with that, Kyle and Lonnie embark on a journey to catch up with the girl and stop a plot to alter history to create a dystopian world. For the full story breakdown, you're kind of out of luck as there really isn't any way to experience the story outside of playing the game for yourself with a translation guide. But hopefully soon Lumia Tales will have their fan translation out, and people will likely put up the cutscenes from that shortly afterwards. With such a short development time, Tales of Destiny 2 ends up looking very similar to Tales of Eternia, in the same way that Tales of Destiny looks similar to Tales of Fantasia. While there are some minor graphical improvements thanks to the increased power of the PS2, it, for the most part, is the same as what we got with Eternia. Towns and dungeons still have their 2D isometric look, giving off a loose sense of 3D, while the player models are still in 2D. While the towns and dungeons remain in 2D, the overworld is now in full 3D, and this includes the character models. This would be a hallmark of the Team Destiny PS2 games, where the character models would be in 3D when travelling the overworld, but in 2D when in towns and dungeons. I'm not a fan of this, as the 3D models look kinda creepy with their super round heads, and I would have preferred it if they had just stuck to the Eternia model and kept the characters in 2D, as it would have kept the art style more consistent. Ignoring the creepy 3D models, Matsumi Inamada returns to design the characters for this game. Tales of Destiny 2's cast attempts to be a merger of Destiny's outlandish personalities and Eternia's strong character growth, and I did somewhat grow to like them despite not being fluent in Japanese. Kyle is well designed to be somewhat of a clone of Stan, looking to break away from his father and form his own identity. And for those wondering why Kyle's last name is Dunamis and not Aileron, it's because he took the name of the orphanage, since he didn't want to appear different from the other kids who all go by Dunamis. Accompanying Kyle on his journey are 5 other members. These include Lonnie, the girl from the lens, whose name turns out to be Rayla, as well as the mysterious Judas, whose identity is pretty obvious to anyone who's played Tales of Destiny 1. Along with these 3, you'll also be joined by Nunnally Fletcher, a young woman from the future, and Harold Baselius, the legendary creator of the Swordians, who get caught up in your party's time-travelling shenanigans. While we no longer have the plethora of campfire scenes, Tales of Destiny 2 instead gives us a ton of skits. Skits had been present in the series since Tales of Destiny 1, however it's not until here that we start experiencing them in their more recognisable form. By pressing select at any time in the world, you can view an exchange between the different party members, in which you will learn more about the characters and the wider world, as well as get hints on where to go next. Skits are the only system to be expanded. The title system had been present since Tales of Fantasia, but mostly acted as a loose achievement system. In Tales of Destiny 2, your character can earn and assign themselves titles, which will allow them to trade off select stats for boosts in others, depending on which title is equipped. Along with skits and titles, we see the return of cooking, lenses, as well as other series staples. However, with this game being in Japanese, my understanding of these systems is somewhat limited to what I was able to decipher, and thus there is definitely more to talk about here, but we still have battles to talk about, so without further ado... Evolving from Tales of Eternia's battle system, we now have the Trusted and Tactical Linear Motion Battle System, or TTLMBS. While Eternia's battle system was no walk in the park, it did somewhat incentivise spamming attacks into enemy lines until they were all defeated. Thus, Tales of Destiny attempts to fix this by introducing several new mechanics. Arguably the biggest addition is the new Spirit Points. This SP gauge is depleted by making attacks and will slowly replenish when the character is taking no actions. The more depleted the SP gauge is, the weaker your attacks will become, and its total depletion will make it near impossible to attack. Your SP gauge will also be drastically shrunk and will deplete faster if your player goes behind enemy lines, thus de-incentivising jumping behind the enemy to double team them with your allies. On the other hand, if you give or take enough hits, your character will begin to glow red and will eventually trigger a Spirit Blast, in which SP will remain maxed out at 100% and your character will have super armour, allowing them to rip into enemy lines for a short time. As a result of this new gauge, the player must now think tactically about when to attack and when to hold back and regain SP. This tactical play has also been complemented by the addition of new guarding techniques available to the player. By pressing backwards during a guard, the character will perform a backstep. This can be used to dodge strikes from the enemy and prevent damage. Meanwhile, pressing forwards will result in a front step in which the player will approach the enemy while guarding, thus allowing you to close the distance without taking a hit. Finally, by pressing down, you'll perform a magic guard which will protect you from magic attacks which normally break through a standard guard. The TP gauge returns but is now kept at 100 for all players, with skills and spells instead becoming cheaper as the character improves their stats. The TP gauge now slowly regenerates throughout fights, which is much nicer than the small one-time regen at the end of battles. This means, outside of boss fights, I don't really see myself needing to use TP restoring items, as the characters will naturally regenerate TP. Spells now take on an interesting new role, as for the first, and I believe only time in a Tales game, every character in the game has the ability to use spells. This includes Kyle, who joins the ranks with his father as one of the few Tales protagonists who can use spells. To make spellcasting more fun, Tales of Destiny 2 now allows you to follow a series of D-pad prompts when casting, which can greatly reduce your cast time. Since casting takes up minimal SP, a strategy arises in which one lays into the enemy with attacks until their SP gauge is low, then falls back and shoots spells until their SP gauge is full again. Destiny 2's 6-member cast is split into 3 groups, with Kyle and Lonnie being melee focused, Rayla and Harold being spell focused, and Judas and Nunnally sort of being a hybrid of both. Skills and spells can now be unlocked via your character's active level. These are shown as 2 diamonds which fill out depending on how much your character attacks, casts, uses skills and conducts combos, as well as the number of select types of elemental attacks you make. By filling this out, as well as frequently using the same skills/spells, you can then buff your skills and spells even further, with enchants that can make them even stronger, less costly to use, etc, etc. You can also give your skills and spells a secondary attack, which is how you conduct mystics in this game. Thanks to the plethora of new features, battles can be quite overwhelming, and it can be quite tempting to leave battles up to the AI. However, if you do plan to drag your friends into this game, Tales of Destiny 2 now offers a dynamic camera that will zoom in and out of battle depending on how far apart your party is. This means that the other players will no longer find themselves off screen, making gameplay much easier. Also, if you find the Moon Selector and don't miss it like I did, you will unlock the new ability to switch the player character mid-battle, allowing for more tactical gameplay as you can cycle through the characters based on their current SP and TP levels. If you do figure out how to play this game properly, you'll be rewarded with grade points. These points are given out and taken away at the end of battle depending on how well the party performed. After finishing the game, these points can then be exchanged at the start of the next playthrough to unlock bonuses. This has since gone on to become a popular series staple. Much like with every previous Tales game before, Motoi Sakuruba and Shinji Tamura are back again to compose their fourth Tales soundtrack. I'm not sure if the superior sound chip in the PS2 has anything to do with it, but I definitely feel like there is a sizable improvement in the music quality here when compared with Tales of Eternia. This is most notable in the game's first battle theme, aptly named Theme of Battle, which has gone on to become one of my favourite battle themes in the series, and it seems Sakuruba agrees as he seemingly kept using it in these latter game scores. Along with the improvement in the music, we also see a large increase in voice lines, with all the skits being fully voiced. We also see a sizable amount of in-battle dialogue and boss fights. However, since I don't speak Japanese, I can't fully comment on these lines. It should also be noted that the Japanese Tales games tend to have more voice lines compared with their English counterparts, which have been noted to cut out on recording lines to save on time and money. As for the opening song, we now have Japanese singer and songwriter Maya Kuraki performing the song Key to My Heart, which, for a game never released in the West, has a surprising amount of English lyrics in it. Unfortunately, Key to My Heart, in my opinion, is one of the Tales' lesser opening songs, and this is made somewhat irritating thanks to Tales of Destiny 2 having one of the longest openings in the series at 2 minutes and 30 seconds. While I'm not a big fan of the opening song, the production IG anime cutscene is still nice to watch, even if I think it's not quite as good as Eternia's opening. After Tales of Eternia practically perfected the 2D Tales formula, it seemed that Team Destiny had an impossible task to accomplish. However, Tales of Destiny 2 somehow manages to show the Tales series can still deliver amazing gameplay, even in an age where all other major game series had gone into the third dimension. The game adds a ton of new features that would go on to become series staples, from backstepping to the grade system to the SP system, which would eventually evolve into the CC and AC systems seen in Graces and Zillia respectively. On the story side, Tales of Destiny 2 does a great job in honouring its predecessor while defining its own identity. Unlike the series' other sequels, it definitely keeps the fan service to a minimum, and in some respects plays off it, with Kyle trying not to be seen as nothing more than Stan's son. Meanwhile, the time travel aspects to the plot, while suffering from the same issues found in Fantasia, also delivers an interesting story, especially when we get to go back and re-experience story elements from the last game, such as helping out Dimlos and his Swordian masters with the Aether Wars. While I really enjoy Tales of Destiny 2, I do not recommend this game for anyone who is not an avid fan of Tales of Destiny or the wider series. While the language barrier will soon be gone, this game remains one of the hardest games in the series due to the constraints of the SP gauge, as well as the complexities of the new battle mechanics. Also, at the end of the day, this game is a sequel to Tales of Destiny, and is somewhat reliant that you have played the first game for its continuing story threads that pop up throughout this game's plot. Despite these flaws, Tales of Destiny 2 would end up being quite a success, outselling Tales of Eternia at almost 1 million copies despite never being released in the West, and being somewhat of a side project while the main team worked on the series' big debut into the third dimension. Speaking about that, it's about time I stop beating around the bush and talk about arguably the most iconic game in the series, Tales of Symphonia.